Choose everything. Choose.
Nigeria's weight in both continental and global politics reiterated as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Nigeria continues. The top U.S. diplomat also unveils plans for a U.S.-Africa summit. And time is of the essence as we follow the moves by the National Assembly and other stakeholders to rescue public universities from yet another impending strike. Hello and welcome to Politics Today, coming to you live from Channels Television's global headquarters here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikelu, sitting in for Seun Okinbaloye. Well, let's start off with our countdown to the release of the white paper from the Lagos Judicial Panel of Inquiry on Restitution for Victims of SARS-related abuses and other matters. The panel has since concluded its work and submitted its reports to the Lagos State government with recommendations. The government now has 11 days to the release of the white paper, as promised by Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu. The final document is expected to be made public and submitted to the National Economic Council. So while we wait, let's head over to the nation's capital, Abuja, where the highest-ranking member of the U.S. Cabinet, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, has been visiting. He was at the presidential villa yesterday to meet the president and vice president, as well as sign a $2.17 billion development objectives assistance agreement with Nigeria. Well, today he was at the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja, where he emphasized America's strategic partnership with Nigeria, a reminder of Nigeria's place as a leader not only on the continent, but in the world at large. He also highlighted 5 key areas of focus for America's foreign policy with Africa at large, which covers the global pandemic, COVID-19, response to climate change, rebuilding economies in post-COVID era, strengthening democracies, and security. He noted the rise of autocratic governments on the continent and also hinted that the U.S. president will be holding a U.S.-Africa summit. To take a listen.
The recession of democracy in many places in Africa cannot be denied. And it is not the will of the people. Survey after survey in countries across the continent show that the people of Africa, be they Ghanaian or Zambian or Ugandan or Tanzanian, support democracy. When given the choice between multi-party elections or strongman rule, one-party states or military control, they choose multi-party elections. That makes it all the more important that leaders show leadership and stop the democratic backsliding that is wiping away their citizens' aspirations. Now, I want to emphasize that democratic backsliding is not just an African problem. It's a global problem. My own country is struggling with threats to our democracy. And the solutions to those threats will come as much from Africa as from anywhere. We need countries from every part of the world to share best practices, to make public pledges, to hold each other accountable. And we need to show how democracies can deliver what citizens want, quickly and effectively. When we fail to do that, people lose their trust in the democratic model. And that fuels the arguments that authoritarian governments make, that their system is better. Now, that's exactly the idea behind the Summit for Democracy that President Biden will host next month. And we very much look forward to Nigeria's participation. Together, we must vow to fight what former President Obama called the cancer of corruption, which drains billions of dollars from economies while undermining people's dignity and gutting their faith in the system. We have to protect free and flourishing civil societies, which give citizens a peaceful means to express grievances and to push for change. And we have to relentlessly defend human rights.
Well, he also spoke about having young people be a major driving force in governance. And earlier in the day, he met with some young innovators, also in Abuja. But not far from that venue, at the presidential villa, a crucial meeting held between President Muhammadu Buhari and a group of leaders from the southeast under the aegis of highly respected Igbo greats. There and then, the president promised to consider the request for the release of Nnamdi Kanu. In a statement released after the meeting by the president's media advisor, Mr. Femi Adesina, the president is quoted to have said, "You've made an extremely difficult demand on me as leader of this country. The implication of your request is very serious. In the last 6 years since I became president, nobody will say I have confronted or interfered in the work of the judiciary. God has spared you and given you a clear head at this age with very sharp memory. A lot of people half your age are confused already, but the demand you made is heavy. I will consider it." So the leader of the delegation, former Minister of Aviation and First Republic parliamentarian Chief Mbazulike Amechi, described the situation in the southeast as painful and pathetic, with businesses and education at the receiving end. He then requested that if Nnamdi Kanu was released to him as the only First Republic minister alive, then that's Kanu, will no longer say the things he had been saying. Well, let's now bring you some other political stories. Here's our political roundup.
Traditional rulers and political stakeholders from the 3 senatorial zones in Imo State under the aegis of Olu Political Consultative Assembly, Owerri Zone Political Leaders Forum, and Okigwe Political Assembly have cautioned the People's Democratic Party in Imo State and its leader, former governor of Imo State, Emeka Ihedioha, to desist from making utterances and unguided statements that is capable of causing a breach of peace and breakdown of law and order in Imo State. Addressing a joint press conference in Owerri, the Imo State capital, Southeast Nigeria, the group accused the PDP and Emeka Ihedioha campaign organization of attempting to overheat the polity and possibly instigate political tension capable of causing a security breach in the state, hiding under a recent gathering tagged Igbo Declaration.
Shortly after the so-called Igbo Declaration, Ihedioha, through his party, apparently declaring war against the state.
Thank you. The Taraba State Governor, Darius Ishaku, says his administration will not bequeath an uncompleted project to the next administration, given his administration's determination to make life worthwhile for all residents of the state. According to the governor, all ministries, departments, and agencies in the state must remit their internally generated revenues come 2022 and as well block all leakages, as he insists that his administration cannot afford wasting of resources going forward. The governor was speaking when he presented the 2022 appropriation bill budget of 146.781 billion naira to the State House of Assembly today, which is slightly above the 2021 budget with 5 billion naira.
The implementation of the 2022 budget will welcome citizens' participation via monitoring or oversight due to our administration's sign in open government partnership.
Leaders of the People's Democratic Party and the candidate of the party in the Anambra governorship election have met with the national chairman-elect Senator Iyorchia Ayu, calling for the incremental application of technology from local elections to general elections to avoid obvious flaws that characterized the November 6th election in Anambra State. The PDP candidate, Mr. Valentine Ozigbo, made the call following what he described as technical hitches in the newly introduced biometric voters authentication system introduced by the Independent National Electoral Commission as it impacts on smooth accreditation and voting processes.
If you have an idea how much we waste through official and non-official means, from INEC to the candidates to the parties, it is colossal. Please, let us embrace technology.
So let's get into the meat of the program. It was exactly a week ago in faraway United Arab Emirates when President Muhammadu Buhari spoke very highly of Nigerians and their competitive spirit anywhere they're found. This, the president said, is a result of good education they acquire from here in Nigeria. But back home, a crisis was brewing in the same education sector. Talk about timing. Well, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, was gearing up for yet another industrial action, just when it looked like 2021 would go down as an ASUU strike-free year. So, coming from 2020, when lecturers were on strike for 9 months in a 12-year calendar, or 12-month calendar rather, some students may have had a panic attack when ASUU gave a 3-week ultimatum to go on strike. Thankfully, the Speaker of the House of Representatives swung into action, and he summoned the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, and ASUU, as well as some other stakeholders, to a meeting. And right there, some promises were made. But the question is, how far-reaching are these promises? Well, let's find out from a man who is in the know. We're joined on the program this evening by Honorable Aminu Suleiman, who's the Chairman of the House Committee on Tertiary Education. Honorable, thank you for joining us on the program. Well, the Speaker's intervention may have brought a glimmer of hope into the situation. For the benefit of Nigerians who are eager for a resolution to this matter, was yesterday's meeting, or the meeting that was held, able to resolve the impasse between the federal government and ASUU?
Well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to further expatiate on what transpired yesterday at the tripartite meeting between ASUU, the executive arm, and of course, the House of Representatives, ably led by our Speaker, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. Substantially, I can assure you that all the issues of concern to ASUU has been discussed very substantially, and as far as we are concerned, far-reaching commitments have been made by the executive through the 2 ministers that represented government, and I was the Minister of Finance and the Minister of State for Education, along with other senior government functionaries that were at the meeting yesterday. Fundamentally, 3 or 4 of the issues raised by ASUU has been thoroughly reviewed and discussed, and some level of understanding were reached. One of the issues has to do with the revitalization fund, which ASUU asserted that an agreement was reached between ASUU and government, to the effect that government has to provide about $1 trillion plus for the revitalization of our institution. Of course, government came with excuses at that time, and an agreement of about 200 million was agreed upon, which is to be paid in tranches, and that tranches is to commence with the payment of 30 billion. And ASUU argue that 2 months away from the agreed date, government has not put in a kobo into that agreement. That matter was discussed, was reviewed, and government through the Minister of Finance assured that the government is ready to pay now. They are only waiting for advice from the ministry how this money will go around, who will get what. The conclusion is to the effect that government is given a week, or government agreed that between now and 1 week, that was yesterday at the meeting, this money will be available to our institution. The second issue has to do with the issue of the earned allowance for members of ASUU. These 2 government confirmed at the meeting that they are ready, the funds are available, but of course, both organs that are involved in this, talking about those who will earn the allowances, that is ASUU members, and permutations and calculations from the NUC and the ministry has to be ready and to be forwarded to the finance. The Speaker demanded and directed that all the bureaucrats should do the best they could and ensure that latest by Monday or Tuesday, the Ministry of Finance have this detail so that they can, within 1 week, effect payment on this. Number 3 has to also do with the complaint brought forward by ASUU in respect of members earning salaries in a manner that left members of ASUU taking half salaries, or in some instances spending 2-3 months without salaries. ASUU blamed this on the modalities of using the IPPS technology, and ASUU, as everybody know, are not in support of the IPPS, and an alternative medium was provided by ASUU, which they call UTAS, and they insisted that to address this issue, it is only proper that government accepted the preference of ASUU in using UTAS to handle benefit of members. This too was agreed, and the Minister of Finance again reaffirmed that government has no problem with the issue of using UTAS, only that it has to be tested to be sure of the efficacy of the technology that is being introduced by ASUU. Meeting resolved that NIDA, which is an arm of the Ministry of Communication, should be directed to ensure accelerated testing of this procedure, so that the nation will be at ease and to be fully satisfied that it will satisfy the aspiration of members of ASUU and without jeopardizing too the internal security, financial security system of the government, since it is now apparent that two system of payment is going to be adopted, one for ASUU and the rest for the members of the general public. The last one
Honorable
is
Suleiman,
the issue of the revisit of the 2009 agreement. And it is agreed, too, that a machinery should be set in place, and is the opinion and directives of the Speaker that a tripartite meeting involving ASUU, the executive arm, and of course the committee of the House, which I'm privileged to chair, should be convoked to ensure a revisit of that agreement. And I felt personally that a revisit of that agreement of 2009 is more than imperative. It is, as far as I'm concerned, the panacea is going to be the panacea to the problem of this endless strike that we are having in our country. And God helping us, I knew through that machinery we will be able to produce a workable academic calendar that is devoid of a disruption now and then.
Okay, so Honorable Suleiman, you have packed, I think, 4 points now. You've talked about the revitalization fund, you referenced the earned allowances, and of course the UTAS versus IPs issue and the 2009 agreement. But ASUU, of course, has way more demands than just those 4, at least 7 of them. And we'll try to get some clarity on exactly what was discussed, especially regarding the revitalization fund and the rest. But for our viewer tonight, to get some better context as to what was discussed during that meeting, I'd like you to listen to the Speaker of the House of Representatives and some of the points he made yesterday.
There might be also a need to sit back and look at a long-term view, because 1.3 trillion is a very large amount of money to raise, even though there was commitments from 2009, then 2013. But the situation physically now is not the same as it was at that time.
The commission delegation will work with the ministry, honorable minister, correct? And for the renegotiation, and they will get back to you on that.
So that's specifically regarding the revitalization fund. So clearly there needs to be a renegotiation. I'm not sure if I got you clearly earlier. Did you say the money should be made available already either by today or the coming days, or there was meant to be a renegotiation of it?
No. You need to understand the perspective from where I'm coming from. I listed the 4 items. The 2009 agreement is actually at the bottom of all the crises that usually led to strike action by ASUU. At that material time, dated back to 2019, government rushed to enter into agreement with ASUU on several items limiting to about 17 at that time. And like the Minister of Finance said, there were several commitments between 2010 up to now that we are negotiating. But up to now, those items have not been fully addressed by government. Now, the issue of renegotiation, as far as I am concerned, is for the benefit of both parties. In industrial relation, whenever an agreement is reached, a reopener clause is usually inserted. In every industrial relation agreement, there must be a reopener clause. And the reopener clause is for the benefit of both parties. If employees through their association entered into agreement and compelling reason arose in the course of implementation, like market forces, like devaluation and the rest, the unions are at liberty to ask for a renegotiation to meet the reality of the moment. On one hand, if the employer, either government or private, also feel that yes, we have entered into agreement, but some compelling economic downturn cannot allow us to implement that agreement, they can invoke the right of renegotiation, reopener clause to come and discuss. So for the benefit of the country, it is only important that that agreement is revisited.
Okay,
So
Honorable Suleiman, I request that you hold your thoughts for a moment. Pardon me. We need to go on a quick break, but when we return, I'd like you to land on that and clarify if that money has been made available, that 1.3 trillion naira, or what exactly has been made available for the revitalization fund, as well as other issues. But that's in a moment, Honorable. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We're still focusing on the situation in the education sector, specifically regarding public tertiary institutions. ASUU has given an ultimatum to the federal government. I mean, we get that a lot, really, and we're trying to look for a way to avert this. And Honorable Suleiman, Aminu Suleiman, the Chairman, House Committee on Tertiary Education, has been speaking with us on this particular one. Honorable Suleiman, thank you for staying with us. So, I mean, series of MOUs and MOAs have been signed in the past. And just last year, 2020, when we had that very long 9-month strike, an MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, as it is called, was signed. And that revitalization fund clause was in it. Now, there were talks about whether it's been paid or not. ASUU came out and said, well, clearly that has not happened. So just to be clear now, with this meeting that we had, that you had, and the House of Representatives Speaker with the Ministry of Finance and Education in attendance, as well as ASUU, was it agreed that the money would be paid in the coming days, or what?
Now, let me just make this very clear. The revitalization fund of the committed 1.3 billion thereabout, I'm not sure I'm exact, but it's about 1.3 thereabout. Government subsequently met with ASUU and make a commitment of paying 230 billion. That the staggering amount of 1.3 is an amount that government cannot contemplate at the moment. And out of the 230, government pledged to start with 30 billion naira. That 30 billion naira, from information available before the committee, even as at yesterday, was to the effect that the ministry has started issuing to benefiting institutions. Of course, ASUU confirmed in the meeting that officially that has not been communicated to them. But of course, unofficially they have heard that a promising note have been issued to several of the institutions. So for me, this is a step forward in the quarrel as it relates to revitalization fund. Since the 30 billion has been agreed by both parties, the issue is whether it has been paid or not. And ASUU is not saying it has not been paid because the money is not going to ASUU, it's going to the benefiting institution. Therefore, if the ministry said they have done that through the institutions, benefiting institution, then of course what is only required is the formality to notify us that this thing has commences. And directive was given specifically to ensure that ASUU is taken along in these processes. This is not in contention. The second issue is the earned allowance, which government through the Minister of Finance pledged that this will be done within the next 1 week. And therefore, we are supposing that by Thursday next week, the issue of the earned allowance too would have been resolved. So these are the two issues, and I needed you to understand these two distinctions.
And it's good to clear that out so our viewers can, of course, understand what the current state of things is. I know you're quite vast with the tertiary education system in Nigeria by the virtue of your position as the chairman of the House Committee on Tertiary Education. But, I mean, having been at meetings with stakeholders, having gone through this cycle time and again, I'm sure you must have caught some things, perhaps, as responsible for this seemingly irretractable impasse, as it were, between the federal government and ASUU, especially in the education sector. So would you tell us, really, what's responsible for this? We had a 9-month-long strike last year. ASUU came out earlier in the year, in September, in fact, much earlier, saying that the federal government had not made good on its promise. And then ASUU is threatening to go on strike. And it looks like we'll keep going on the cycle time and again. So what exactly is the problem, really, in that sector?
From 2013 to date, I have the fortune or misfortune of being part of all this, with due respect, rigmarole. I've been privileged to be the chair of this committee from 2012 thereabout, and therefore I have a little institutional memory as to what transpired. Like I said, the whole problem emanates from the horrid signed agreement between ASUU and government, and that was in 2009. Now, to go to your question, the panacea to this problem is to resume discussion in the remaining items that have not been addressed by government to date, and is to holistically take them item by item. Because like I told you a while ago, that the tradition of industrial relation is such that collective bargaining and agreement usually terminate with a signed agreement, right, to allow for a reopener clause. And I'm happy that even ASUU themselves are at the forefront of asking for a reopener.
So it
now,
sounds like
this reopener clause,
right, it sounds like you're saying, pardon me, Honorable, it sounds as though you're saying perhaps negotiations is at the root of this problem. But then, on a final note, as we wind down, how truly disturbed those in positions of authority when these strikes happen? Some would tell you that most of their children aren't studying in public schools or in Nigeria at that. So it might be difficult to relate with that issue. So how true is that for you and perhaps your colleagues, I mean, when faced with these issues?
It was because we are more than, not even concerned, more than concerned, that ASUU issued this ultimatum on Monday. And on Tuesday, the first item to be discussed on the floor of the House was the issue of the ultimatum. And it was unanimously agreed that an immediate meeting within 72 hours be convoked to discuss this issue. And House further mandated that the Speaker himself should be part of that meeting. I don't think there is anything more that will show the seriousness on the part, at least, of the legislature. And I tell you, even during the regime of Jonathan, before him, Adua, and even Obasanjo's regime, all the meetings that have been held are usually at the instance of the National Assembly. As far as we're concerned, we've been doing the best we could to ensure that this matter is terminally addressed and resolved. Otherwise,
well, hope.
For some of all that are involved, usually involved in this.
You can land on that as we wind down.
Are involved in this. We are also troubled by the fact that each time this thing happens, prejudice is being mounted, and Nigerians, like you have just cited now, some understand, some do misunderstand our position as to whether we care or we do not care. But I can assure you that we are patriotic Nigerians. We feel the pain of our own children, my own children and your own children that are in public schools, and we don't usually sleep when these issues are on. I want to believe that this process might, and I believe with sincerity of purpose from both sides, might bring an end to this issue. And we're going to work as much as it is possible for us to ensure that all hands are on deck and the issues are addressed.
We definitely look forward to that. But I'd like to thank you so much, Honorable Aminu Suleiman, who's the Chairman of the House Committee on Tertiary Education. Thank you for those insights, and we do hope that this is solved as soon as possible. Well, we'll go on a break now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to security. This week has been quite eventful security-wise. I'll be taking a look at the issues and perhaps connect the dots. To join us again. Well, we'll now turn our attention to security. Just this week alone, we've seen a massacre in Sokoto where the governor says the death toll has now risen to 43. Then an invasion of Manga community in Taraba State by attackers said to be from the separatist Ambazoni group in southern Cameroon. 11 persons, including a community leader, were killed in that attack. And this morning, we woke up to an attack in Damboa local government area of Borno State yet again. Well, it's one too many, and we'll try to get some clarity into what might be playing out here. Are we seeing some sort of resurgence? Well, tonight on the program, we're joined by Major General Henry Ayola, who is a former theater commander, Operation Safe Haven. He joins us from Lagos. Good to have you on the program, Major General. I know it's quite a lot, really, but we'll try to take this perhaps individually and maybe connect the dots, if there are any. Thank you for joining us. So while we're still recovering from last week's killing of a general and 3 soldiers in Askira-Uba, Chibok, Borno State, we woke up to the news of yet another attack in neighboring Damboa, which the military says was foiled. But in order to better understand this, from what you've seen and heard, how do we situate these attacks? Does that imply some sort of resurgence, or what exactly?
Yeah, thank you very much, Coyote. Good evening, viewers. Well, we'll notice that, yes, like you rightly said, we've had some lull in the past few weeks, which is a good news, both for our armed forces and for the nation at large. But we also know that last month, there was the news that Abu Musab, the head, Abu Musab al-Banawi, the head of the ISWAP, was killed, even though the group has not confirmed that, but I mean, authorities within the armed forces have confirmed that, and that might have been responsible for the law that followed after that. And it could be that they have regained their control or command, or a new person has taken over. And so, of course, he has to show strength, as a new commander. So we will not be surprised to start finding the stage back and necessarily wanting to, demystify the setback they have suffered. So that's one possibility. Of course, the one associated with banditry in the northwest, in Sokoto and other parts of northwest, well, there have been a spree of successes in our internal security operations, particularly the ones targeting the bandits. And that, of course, is responsible for the quietness we have seen in that area. And so, again, if we see it as a lull period, then we also know that, the job is not done yet. Usually in war, the victory, 1 or 2 victories in one battle, yes, it will serve to encourage the armed forces. It will serve to boost the morale of the officers and men. It will serve to encourage the nation as a whole. But we know it's not yet to huru. These are, at best, preliminary operations leading, hopefully, to some consolidating and sustained operations that can then bring the entire thing towards some final conclusive solutions. That's what I think.
Just to follow up on the issue of leadership of the terrorist group, which you raised earlier, just a week after the CDS confirmed that al-Banawi had been killed, the NSA also confirmed that the new ISWAP leader, who was perhaps reinstated after al-Banawi was killed as well. So, I mean, if you cut the head of a snake twice, that should be enough to deal a major blow to the snake. So what more needs to be done, really?
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect of the nature of insurgency. You know, insurgents and terrorists, they operate, most of these names we bandied around are actually pseudonyms, except themselves, even within their own ranks. Nobody is sure who those identities are. If you remember, for Shekau was killed like maybe 10 times before the eventual one that we know that he died. You know, so we know that these things do happen. So the possibilities are many, but what we know is that we.
Okay, well, General, we'll try to get the light.
We know that there can be.
There you go. Please go on.
Yes, I'm trying to. It's back on now.
Yes, please go on.
So with that kind of setting, yeah, we hope that over time, you know, even the last time Shekau was killed eventually, they still denied it. But, you know, we know after about a month or more, we began to know that he was not showing up anywhere and all of that. You know, it was confirmed. It could no longer be hidden. So, yeah, we can't rule out that possibility that that is what is happening right now. But the final solution, or the more sustainable solution, if we like, is for us to bring overwhelming force on these issues. The idea of these trickles of operations and going forward and stepping back and all of that, and of course most of the time the initiative has been on their side, yeah, because that's the nature of this kind of operation, because you are talking of an operation where there are no lines, where the enemy is not particularly located and could show up anywhere, you know. So what I will always advise, like I've said this again and again before now, that we need to bring overwhelming force to bear. One, we need to, deliberately create preliminary operations that will help to garner the requisite intelligence and operational momentum towards some final punch, sustainable operations that will happen either in cascade or concurrently in Syria or in parallel form, that can then keep the enemy's head down over a long period sufficiently to not just deter but to destroy and finally decimate the adversary. And that requires a whole lot, not just in terms of men, in terms of armament, in terms of equipment, in terms of intelligence, in terms of all the support that our officers and men in the field need to be able to do that.
Well, it's been quite interesting having this conversation with you, Major General Henry Ayola, who is former Theater Commander, Operation Safe Haven. We'd like to appreciate you for sharing your thoughts with us on the program tonight.
Thank you very much.
We'll go on a quick break. When we return, we'll take the second leg of this conversation. Quite a number of issues to raise as well. Don't forget, there's still the issue of banditry and that incursion, which is said to have happened on account of the separatist group from southern Cameroon. So stay with us. We'll have the final line in a moment. So let's conclude this, dealing a final major blow to this issue of insecurity, be it terrorism, insurgency, banditry, or what have you. And to continue this conversation with us, we're joined by Mr. Kabir Adamu, who's a security consultant. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good to see you again, Mr. Adamu. So I'm going to pick up from where we left with Major General Ayola, which he was talking about dealing a final blow. And he was trying to talk about how to go about this. And I'd like you to, weigh into this as well. Is it in terms of, if we will deal a final blow, will it be supported by maybe more finance, more men, more equipment, better tactics, as it were, intelligence? Where exactly does that final blow lie, really?
Thank you, Kayode. My title is Dr. Kabir Adamu, and I'm the Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited. We have a database of incidents that we keep, and what we have seen from the last quarter, for the last month of October, into the first 15 days of November, is a shift in security incidents across the country. So in summary, we've seen a shift of security incidents from the northern half of the country, incidentally, into the southern half of the country in the month of October. And then very interestingly, in the northeast, for the first 15 days of November, we saw a shift from the other parts of Borno, northern Borno, central Borno, with developments mainly in the southern half of Borno. So like you mentioned in your introductory remarks, Askira Uba, Dambua, all these are in southern part of Borno. That's where these, especially the Islamic State in West Africa province, have been concentrating their attacks. Now, how do we end all of this? And I'm very, very delighted that during the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Nigeria, when he met Mr. President, he actually mentioned it, and this is something we've been highlighting over time. Winning the hearts and minds of the local population is how to end this. They are the ones who would provide you the intelligence. They are the ones who would support the counter-insurgency operation, the counter-terrorism operation. And the best way to do that is by carrying them along in all the initiative. That's where I differ with my military colleagues. We need firepower, no doubt. The enemy has enormous firepower, and we also need a firepower that is beyond them. But firepower alone will never end an asymmetric warfare. It's a combination of what is called countering violent extremism, and that's what the U.S. Secretary of State told Mr. President. Enhance that aspect of countering violent extremism in combination with the kinetic force that you are using, and then we'll be able to end this.
Interesting. So I know we've had this conversation before, and let me just congratulate you. I know it's belated on your PhD. I honestly didn't know. But, this conversation around what is it, kinetic or non-kinetic, has been on for a while. You referenced the visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and a lot of people would tell you that, countries will only go as far as their interests lie, really, and they have a lot of examples. So in terms of balancing this with what we can do in-house and the kind of help we should require or expect from outside, how do we strike that balance such that we don't rely too much on outside help, and when it doesn't come, we are stranded?
Yes, capacity building in the area of intelligence as an example. In today's world, data rules the world, and that is why I started by giving you the data. You look at the data and you are able to interpret trends. You know, for instance, that, okay, what you're doing in terms of the kinetic force is pushing the enemy to another side of the state or another side of the country. How do you block that gap? Data would tell you that. I sit in my office, I'm able to see this trend and interpret it, and I'm hoping that the military also is doing that so that it can adjust its operations. And of course, we have 27 ministries and departments involved in security in the country. Now, at what point does coordination play a role? So that's the second point. Intelligence is crucial. It gives you, especially when you are able to use and interpret data. And in today's world, you need AI to interpret the data. The volume of data is just too much that the human brain or, using manual means, you can't interpret that data. So you need AI, and AI is available in different forms, in forms of software, in terms of what our partners such as the US can provide for us, or even the UK. So that's number one. Number two, like I said, coordination. How do you bring these 27 ministries, departments, and agencies together so that they have an understanding of what each party is doing? The military component component is important. The aspects around addressing the root causes of insurgency is crucial. And what are these root causes? Blocking the funding of these groups. Where do they get their funding? Where do they get their weaponry? How are they able to recruit? It's not the military that will do that. It's this other component. So how do you bring all of these 27 together so that you identify these root causes and address them? And then speaking about coordination, how does the current cooperation between the federal government and state government improves so that you address unemployment, you address poverty and drug addiction and the several other drivers of insecurity? How do you ensure that issues around climate change that are contributing to insurgency are addressed through this enhanced coordination? And then, of course, in the long run, you also want to ensure that the partnership between you and your neighboring countries is enhanced. No matter how good we are in addressing terrorism, if we don't improve this partnership between us and Niger and Chad and Cameroon as an example, then frankly, we're not going anywhere. So all of these three things that I mentioned, we can use our international partners. Of course, we have to start it in-house and then bring in our international partners to support us. And in talking about the U.S., it's the lead in terms of the global campaign against terrorism. A few years ago, they did place a bounty on the now late leader of Jamaat al-Ahli al-Dawat wal-Jihad, Abu Bakr Shekau. That is how far they went. They placed, if I remember, $5 million or $7 million US bounty before the Nigerian government placed the bounty on him. So we do have the platform to seek that international cooperation, because terrorism is not just a state an in-state thing. It's a global thing, and there are partners around the world that would help us. If they don't help us, then the likelihood of that affecting them is very, very high.
So speaking of partnership, Dr. Damu, we had a conversation with the governor of Taraba State yesterday, and I mean, regarding that incursion and the attack that saw the killing of 11 people in that community. And he said that he had called for help from the military, specifically regarding policing the border between Taraba State and neighboring Cameroon. He says he thinks that that border is actually one of the longest in the country, and it's been quite a concern. So you've talked about partnership. I don't know how much of a partnership has gone down between Nigeria and Cameroon in that area, but in terms of AI now, I mean, you can also add partnership to it. So we don't see this sort of attack again. We're bringing a lot of ideas together. Where do you think the solution to that incursion lies?
A few years ago, we arrested some Ambassadorian dissidents here in Nigeria, and then we repatriated them back to Cameroon. For me, that is the height of partnership. And like I said earlier on, we have a platform to enhance this bilateral and multilateral cooperation that would suit our interest. At that time, when we repatriated those Ambassadorian dissidents from Nigeria, that was when we got involved in that local war in Cameroon. And if I was going to comment on it, I would have said that is when we should have anticipated the possibility of an attack into Nigeria by the group, because frankly, we have poked them in the eye, and they could react at any point in time. Then a few years after that, we had, through statements by the indigenous people of Biafra and the Ambassadorian dissidents, that they are forming a partnership. So there were telltale signs to clearly inform us of the possibility of an attack by this group. And if the governor of Taraba is telling us that he did invite the military, the only thing I would say is that the military is stretched. The last time we heard from the Chief of Defense Staff, he mentioned that they are deployed in 34 states across the country. So they are stretched, and having additional demand on them is frankly not feasible at the moment. The point I'm trying to make is, like I said earlier on, there are 27 ministries, departments, and agencies. Why do we always call the military? It is not the only institution within the national security architecture that has responsibility for security and defense. Where are the customs? Where are the immigration? Isn't it their responsibility for border protection? Yes, if the issue becomes escalated, you can bring in the military, but they shouldn't be the first line of call to fall in. And then, of course, where you have issues like that we already anticipated, I believe that the partnership between Nigeria and Cameroon and the type of border management system that we should have in place should have really taken care of this. The incident that happened in Taraba, in my opinion, shouldn't have happened.
We're winding down in less than a minute, Doctor. I know that this perhaps comes down to finance. And looking at the 2022 budget proposal, you see that defense security generally accounts for just almost 15% of that budget. And that's more than infrastructure and perhaps health put together. Do we need to spend more?
First, we need to block the leakages. Prioritize the areas, and then make sure the allocations go to those areas that have been prioritized. If tantamount to having your bucket is leaking and then you drop the bucket thinking that the leakage will stop. You first need to block those leakages and then prioritize those areas that you want to. I do not think we necessarily need more. Rather, right. No, we need more. We need efficient deployment of that resource.
And I think that's a great place to leave it. Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Consultant and MD Beacon Consultant Limited. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on the program tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's our show. The weekend is upon us. Do make it fruitful and restful as well. Goodbye.